are new rules and regulations regarding bobby calves.
Yes, Rob, thank you very much for having me. These rules come into place on the 1st of August, and basically farmers just need to be aware that they have some responsibilities for the animals in their care, and this is nothing new. We're just formalising these a little more than what they have been done in the past. So MPI have worked very hard over the last few years to improve the welfare of this really vulnerable class of livestock, because we're talking about calves that are 4 days of age, and they have a number of requirements that need to be met that perhaps adult stock don't need.
I guess the first one really is that they need a feed.
They sure do, yeah. Absolutely. So the regulations itself that are coming to play as of the 1st of August, there are 4 of them, and we'll be transitioning to the other 3 in 2017. But essentially, we want farmers to be feeding their calves and actually providing them with the same level of care and husbandry as they would with any other class of livestock on the place, or their replacement calves. For example, bobby calves should be treated no differently, and that's why we're actually calling these regulations young calf regulations, not just bobby calves, because it is about all young calves. But essentially, we know in the dairy industry that, you know, by virtue of numbers, that 50% of the calves that are born are going to be male. Last year we killed upwards of 2.5 million calves, and we had a mortality rate of down to 0.25%, which is a marked improvement from back in 2008, where it was 0.7%. So the goalposts have changed. Welfare is an intrinsic part of any farming system, and by and large most farmers know that. But it's about bringing everybody up to speed and in line with MPI and the other stakeholders, because it's about perception, Rob. It's about how the New Zealand public view farmers in this country, and it's also about our market access, how our overseas markets view us. And as we've just discussed with the advent of social media and communications now, something that happens in a farm over on the West Coast could be communicated over to Europe or the States within an instant.
Within seconds.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I guess the major points would be feed them, get something into them. You're not allowed to move them for 4 days.
So the calves have to be a minimum of 4 full days of age, 4 full days of age. And so we're asking farmers just to have a system in place to ensure that calves that are likely to be transported are 4 full days of age. And there are a number of different ways that that can be done. So we want calves with full bellies that have been fed. We want calves that are able to stand of their own volition and walk around freely, that are free of disease, that have bright eyes, the ears are up, no scours, have well-worn feet, so the balls of their feet are well-worn, which, yep.
Dairy NZ have got a poster that you can get, haven't they?
They sure do, and I recommend to all farmers actually, irrespective of whether you're dairy farming or not, because there's some great rules to follow about the transportation of stock. But certainly there's a pamphlet that's available on the Dairy NZ website that talks about 8 points that one needs to consider before a calf would be eligible or fit for transport.
So bright eyes.
Yep. So
correct ear tagging.
Yep.
And dry navel. That's important.
Dry navel is really important, and we do mean a dry navel. Over previous years, we've had calves coming in, and I'm certainly one of the vets at a processing premises that receive these animals. I have calves coming in with raw, fleshy navels. That's not acceptable. They need to be dry, they need to be dehydrated, and they need to be shriveled. So I really want to get that point across to farmers this season.
And Victoria, you can't send them into Ireland?
Absolutely not. Transport across the Cook Strait is now no longer applicable or possible for these animals. That's a regulation that is in place. It's because, again, Rob, as I alluded to at the beginning of this conversation, we're talking about a very vulnerable class of livestock that requires special care. Transport for animals is stressful enough as it is, but for a young calf, it places even more stress on them, and that's an arduous trip across the Cook Strait, as we know.
For anybody, including two-legged people.
Of course. So no transport across the Cook Strait. Maximum of 12 hours transport now from the time of pickup to the time of delivery. So no longer do we want to see these cows on trucks or calves on trucks for 15 hours at a time.
Well, they need to be fed in that 12 by then anyway.
Well, we still have this rule in place, this what we call the 28-hour rule, which is 28 hours from last feed to slaughter. But that is one of the transitional rules that will come into place for next season, for 2017, where a calf, there'll be 24 hours from last feed to processing.
Now, you're working with the transport companies as you do with TB and that sort of thing?
Absolutely. So we're working with all of the stakeholders. So it's everybody along the supply chain, Rob. So it's the farmers and their farm workers, and looking at the systems that they have in place on farm. And that's in collaboration with the likes of Dairy NZ, who are doing a fantastic job. We're also working with the transport industry and individual transport operators to give them an understanding of what training their drivers require, so that those drivers feel confident when they go out onto a farm, they know what to look for and can make an instant determination as to whether those animals are fit for transport.
And they can say no.
Absolutely. And that's something that MPI have constantly discussed with the transport industry, that they absolutely have the right to decline. Because if they do pick up an animal that is not fit for transport, then essentially they can be prosecuted under the Animal Welfare Act. There's sections under the Act.
It's a pretty big idea to say no then, isn't
it? It absolutely is. And I have a great degree of sympathy for the drivers, because often they're caught between a rock and a hard place. But we're saying, hey, look, it's just not worth it. So if you're not satisfied that your calves in this particular instance have met all of those 8 requirements, then don't pick them up.
Because literally, you're going to fall out with the farmer, but you don't get sued.
Well, that's right. I mean, it's a difficult situation to be in, and I understand farmers want to get those calves off their place because they've got the next cohort coming through. But again, it's about saying everybody has a responsibility along the supply chain for the welfare of these animals. So if everybody does their job, you won't need people like us around.
So there you are. If you don't do your job, you've got to get prosecuted. And if you do your job, you've got no problem at all.